When it comes to car financing, it really depends. In my perspective, a vehicle should be seen as a tool that gets you from point A to point B. It's functional, it looks good, it drives safely, it's safe to drive, and can drive the speed limits. However, I know many of us see a vehicle as an extension of our status or wealth, and I think for those who are on a budget or don't have the actual cost for owning a premium or brand new vehicle, they should definitely not think that way, because those who think that way end up losing more money and actually not owning a vehicle at all, simply because 8 out of 10 times they need to trade in their vehicle because they cannot keep up with their monthly payments, maintenance costs, or repair costs, and insurance costs. And the reason why I explicitly state this is because many people purchase a vehicle on their maxed out budget. What do I mean by a maxed out budget? Basically, you have $20,000. This individual ends up buying a vehicle for $20,000. Or the individual has $50,000 and they end up buying a vehicle for $50,000. Or they have $100,000 and they end up buying a vehicle for $100,000. And then they forget to account for all the external costs, mainly insurance and maintenance, along with possibly any dings that may happen to the vehicle. And when you don't account for these, like I mentioned, 8 out of 10 times, you most likely will not be able to keep up with monthly payments, have to trade in your vehicle, and still be in debt and not even own a car. So you're gonna be carless and you're gonna be in debt. Don't do this. So what should you do then? In my perspective, if you have $20,000 budgeted for a car, you should generally purchase a car that's $3,000 to $10,000. That way you have anywhere from $17,000 to $10,000 available, so that if any issues arise, you can easily pay for it outright and not having to deal with it. A control arm breaks, bam, you paid for it. An oil change, bam, you can easily pay for it. There happens to be a scratch on the car, bam, you can pay for it. You want to upgrade the speakers, bam, you can upgrade the speakers. Now, if you just purchase a car for $20,000, most likely you won't be able to do any maintenance, repairs, or upgrades. And if something bad does happen, you're most likely going to have to trade in the vehicle. And I just want to say, the more exotic, the more premium, and the more newer the vehicle is, the more everything else is expensive. Insurance ends up skyrocketing. Maintenance starts skyrocketing. Repair starts skyrocketing. An oil change on a more premium car costs 3 times to like 6 times more. So instead of paying like $20 to $30, you're now paying $150 to $200 to replace the engine oil, which is a very common maintenance you have to do on any ICE vehicle. And when it comes to premium, it doesn't really mean much, especially if you view a car as a tool from point A to point B. Yes, it's going to have some nice leather seats, and it's going to have slightly louder speakers and a better time accelerating from 0 to 40 miles per hour. But generally speaking, at the end of the day, if you can make it to the speed of 25 miles per hour to 70 miles per hour and your car is safe to drive and it's aesthetically pleasing to look at, then it's a-okay and you got yourself a really good vehicle. You got a vehicle that the kings and queens of back in the day wish they had. They were riding horses in those days, not cars. So any car that you drive modern day is a privilege that we all have. And so premium cars are for show, and if you can definitely afford the vehicle, then that's fine. Sure, I'm not even hating on that. If you can pay for it, then that's totally fine. And people have luxurious goods that they have and that they enjoy, and that's a-okay. It's when you cannot afford it and think you need it that when it becomes a problem. And so in my perspective, when the average person ends up buying a vehicle, I feel like they only have enough money to drive the car away from the dealership. And the moment they learn about insurance costs, repair costs, maintenance costs, they end up going bonkers because they didn't realize how expensive it truly is to maintain that dream car that they wanted. And these are just normal maintenance you have to do for any car. So whether it's a Nissan or a Mercedes, you will have to eventually replace the control arm. You will eventually have to do an engine oil change. You will eventually have to do an alignment. And everything's significantly more expensive on the BMW versus the Nissan. So a Nissan, a Hyundai, a Toyota, a Kia, a Mazda, they're all great cars. You don't need to get the Porsche, the Ferrari, the BMW, the Mercedes, the Audi, especially in the beginning, especially if you're on a budget, especially if you just want to save money and you don't even genuinely care about how exotic your vehicle is. Yes, you're going to be missing out on leather seats and turbochargers, but like I said, you're just getting from point A to point B, and you could only go a maximum speed limit. Going 200 miles per hour is not legal and practically pointless. So I wouldn't really care about those stats when I'm purchasing my car. As long as it can hit the speed limits I want to go, then that's a great car. So in general, it's best to get a well-maintained used vehicle and just keep on maintaining it. A lot of people get the wrong idea that after 2 to 3 years, they need to like get rid of that car because they don't want to maintain it anymore. But in reality's sake, it's just better to maintain that vehicle. You're going to save way more money by maintaining it. And this means oil changes every 3,000 miles. And also every 60,000 miles, you may have to do a transfer case oil change, a differential oil change, a transmission oil change, coolant change, radiator fluid change, power steering fluid change, brake fluid change, along with parts that just are bound to break, a control arm, stabilizer links, ball joints, brake pads, replacing your tires. These are all parts of the car that will need to be replaced regardless if your car is some exotic $1 million car. If you're driving that on the daily, the car is going to have its brakes replaced. The only difference, it's going to cost significantly more on the exotic premium car rather than the Toyota or Nissan or Kia. So then, should you finance a used vehicle? In my perspective, you should just purchase a used vehicle outright. However, if you do want to finance a used vehicle, then I recommend finding an interest rate of 5% or less. And when you are looking for financing for a car, I recommend just skipping financial institutions and banks and other third-party credit issuers because they tend to give the highest rates, especially for used vehicles. So you're better off just looking for dealerships that are going to give you the best interest rates. And also, I recommend just asking what the average interest rate the dealership gives out before even applying to do a credit check. That way you don't waste any hard credit inquiries. Like if the dealership says on average they give out 12% interest rates, then I wouldn't even bother with that dealership. Now, if the dealership says they give out average interest rates of 4%, then I recommend applying to that one. That way you're most likely to get an interest rate of 5% or less. And the reason why I say don't finance a used vehicle is 1, the interest rates tend to be high. 2, used vehicles tend to be cheaper. And so I recommend just purchasing it outright in full. That way you don't have to worry about it. However, if you do run a business or an entrepreneur or you need that money to stabilize your wealth, then fine, you can finance your $4,000 used vehicle. But if you're not doing it for return of investment purposes, then I generally recommend not financing it. Because what happens to most people is that this $4,000 loan that they basically got, they end up using it for something else and then they forget about it. And then when it comes to monthly payments or repair costs or maintenance, they don't have that money anymore. And then they may end up having to trade in the car and lose the car and also still be in debt. So I generally recommend just paying it right so you don't have to deal with that. Now, how about a new car? So for new cars, if you can afford the new car, if you can afford the insurance for the car, and you can afford the maintenance, then that's totally fine. However, when you do purchase a new car, it usually comes with a 5-year warranty. Therefore, there isn't really any maintenance cost, at least for the first 5 years. However, even though you're getting the maintenance for free, you're still significantly paying way more money for a new car versus a used car. The moment you buy a brand new car and you drive it off the lot, you already lost 20% of its value. And 2 years later, it's most likely going to lose anywhere between 30% to 70% of its value, meaning a $40,000 car may end up being worth only $20,000 after 2 to 3 years. So even though you're saving on maintenance, you're still significantly paying way more. You can literally buy a 3-year-old or 5-year-old version of the exact same model and save at least 30% if not more. And insurance on newer cars are always more expensive on older vehicles. So just please take note of that. However, like I said, if you can afford the car, afford the insurance, afford the maintenance, then fine. That's all gravy and good. And I have no hate for that. And so now you're probably asking me, should I finance a new car or not? So just like I said in the used vehicle, if you can pay the car outright in cash, then I generally recommend just paying the vehicle in full. However, if you are an entrepreneur or it is for business purposes or you need that cash to stabilize your wealth, then fine. You can finance the vehicle and use it to create an ROI or to stabilize your wealth. However, if you're not going to use that cash at all and you're just going to leave it aside, then I generally recommend just paying the car outright. That way you don't have to deal with the incident if you end up using that money that was saved for your car. And so if you do end up spending that money, that could mean that you can't afford the monthly payments anymore. That could mean that you cannot afford any maintenance costs that are not covered by your warranty. And so that can also lead to more collateral damage in a sense that you can't afford the car at all, so you have to trade it in. And whenever you trade in a vehicle, especially when you trade it in ASAP, you tend to lose even more money if you were to just sell it slow and steady. And so you're going to be left with no car and be in debt. And so I generally recommend paying it out in full. However, I do understand on newer and more expensive vehicles, it just makes more sense to finance it because you then have access to that loan, which is basically being financed to you at anywhere between 0 to 3%. And when you do finance a new car, I generally recommend 2% or less. Anything higher is not worth it. And again, the dealerships give the best interest rates. And just like your used vehicle, you still need to maintain your new vehicle. This means wash your car, do oil changes, do the proper oil for your oil changes, get your car inspected and see if there's any issues that need to be fixed. Fix them before they actually break. That way you don't have to deal with being stranded in the middle of the road and then paying more fees in terms of towing, transportation, and whatnot. Always maintain your car, whether used or new. And just to summarize this video, if you're buying a vehicle and if you're on a budget or you want to save cash, get a well-maintained used vehicle and just pay it out in full. If you are going to finance it, get an interest rate of 5% or less, though I don't recommend it at all for a used vehicle. Now, if you're getting a new vehicle, if you are an individual, I then recommend paying the car in full. However, if you are a business or you're an entrepreneur and you could see that money being invested into a venture that brings an ROI, then that's totally fine. Like if you're purchasing a car for $40,000 and you're financing it, and for every $10,000 you make $2,000, then fine, you're making a profit, right? You can use that money to make even more money, and that's totally fine. However, if you're just an individual and you're not really in tune with your spending and you don't really know your inflow and outflow of cash and your daily expenses, then I generally recommend just paying the car in full. That way you don't have to deal with any issues in terms of not being able to pay the monthly car financing fees or any repairs that you may have to do that's not covered under warranty or anything else that arises. You can just generally pay it off. That way you don't have to deal with trading in the vehicle and losing it. Let me know in the comments section down below if you agree with me if you should finance a used vehicle or if you should finance a new vehicle or not. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. I'll see you in the next video. This is Mike Gap signing out. Have a good one and stay strong.